The fog rolled into the valley just before sunset, a thick, creeping mist that seemed to swallow everything in its path. It cloaked the small town of Hollow Creek in an unsettling silence, a silence so profound it felt almost tangible, as if the fog itself was absorbing every sound. The streetlights flickered on, casting an orange glow that did little to pierce the gloom. Their light seemed to be swallowed by the fog, creating an eerie, otherworldly atmosphere.
Liam parked his car at the edge of town, the engine ticking as it cooled. He sat there for a moment, staring into the fog, gathering his thoughts. He held the letter in his gloved hands, the paper brittle and yellowed with age. It felt fragile, as if it might crumble to dust at any moment. It was addressed to him, but from a sender he didn't recognize. The handwriting was elegant, almost archaic, and the ink had faded to a dull brown. The letter spoke of a house, a legacy, and a darkness that needed confronting. It was cryptic, filled with references to things he didn't understand.
Liam stepped out of the car into the cold, damp air. The chill cut through his coat, making him shiver. He could hear the rustling of leaves in the nearby woods, the only sound besides his own breathing. The woods seemed alive, whispering secrets he couldn't quite hear. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows that danced and twisted in the fog. They moved like spectres, adding to the eerie feeling that had settled over the town.
Liam shivered, pulling his coat tighter around him as he started walking towards the address on the letter. 13 Whispering Pines Lane. The name alone sent a chill down his spine, conjuring images of haunted houses and ghost stories. The name alone sent a chill down his spine. It was a place he had heard of in hushed whispers, a place that was said to be cursed.
He hadn't been back to Hollow Creek in over 20 years. The town held too many memories, most of them painful, not since he was a boy. He remembered running through these streets, carefree and full of life, before everything changed. The town hadn't changed much, the same crooked lampposts, the same overgrown gardens, the same air of forgotten sadness that clung to everything. It was as if time had stood still here, preserving the town in a state of perpetual melancholy. But something felt different this time. There was an undercurrent of tension, a sense that something was about to happen. The silence was heavier, the air thicker. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The atmosphere was charged, electric with anticipation.
Liam continued walking, his footsteps echoing softly on the empty pavement. Each step seemed to reverberate through the fog, amplifying the silence. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a drumbeat of apprehension against his ribs. The closer he got to the address, the faster it beat. He didn't know why he was doing this, why he felt compelled to answer this mysterious summons. It was as if an invisible hand was guiding him, pushing him forward. Why he felt compelled to answer this mysterious summons. The letter had a pull on him, a magnetic force that he couldn't resist. But something drew him forward, some unseen force that he couldn't explain. It was as if the letter had awakened something within him, something that had been dormant for years. He just hoped he wouldn't regret it. As he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking his every move.
Number 13 loomed at the end of the street, a Victorian mansion shrouded in shadow and neglect. It stood like a sentinel of forgotten times, its grandeur now a mere whisper of what it once was. The paint peeled from its walls like scabs, revealing the rotting wood beneath. Each flake of paint that fell seemed to carry with it a piece of the house's soul, leaving behind a skeleton of memories. The windows were dark, lifeless eyes staring out into the fog. They seemed to hold secrets, stories of the past that were now lost in the mists of time. The iron gates hung open, creaking mournfully in the breeze like a warning. They were the guardians of the mansion, their rusted hinges groaning under the weight of years gone by.
Liam stopped at the gate, his breath catching in his throat. The sight of the mansion filled him with a mix of dread and curiosity, a pull that he couldn't quite explain. He could feel a palpable aura of sadness emanating from the house, a weight of sorrow that pressed down on him like a physical burden. It was as if the very air around the mansion was heavy with the grief of its past inhabitants. He hesitated for a moment, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But something deeper, A sense of duty, or perhaps destiny, urged him to move forward. But the letter, clutched tightly in his hand, urged him forward. It was a lifeline, a connection to the past that he couldn't ignore.
He pushed the gate open and stepped onto the overgrown path leading to the front door. Each step felt like a journey through time. The crunch of dead leaves underfoot, a reminder of the years of neglect. The path was littered with dead leaves and broken branches, the remnants of years of neglect. It was a testament to the passage of time, nature reclaiming what was once hers. The air grew colder, damper, the fog swirling around his ankles like tendrils of smoke. It was as if the house itself was breathing, exhaling a chill that seeped into his bones.
He could hear the faintest of whispers carried on the wind, voices that seemed to call out to him from the shadows, whispers that seemed to slither into his ears and burrow into his mind. They were not just sounds, but echoes of the past, memories that refused to be forgotten. He reached the front door, its surface cracked and weathered. Each crack was like a wrinkle on an old face, telling a story of time and endurance. The brass knocker was shaped like a grotesque gargoyle, its eyes seeming to follow him as he raised his hand and knocked 3 times. The sound was a stark contrast to the silence, a bold declaration of his presence. The sound echoed through the silence, loud and intrusive. It was as if the house itself was acknowledging his arrival, the echoes reverberating through the empty halls.
Liam held his breath, listening for any sign of life from within. But there was nothing. The silence was thick, almost tangible, wrapping around him like a shroud. Only the echo of his own heartbeat in his ears. It was a lonely sound, a reminder of his isolation in this place of forgotten memories and lingering spirits. The door creaked open as if inviting him in, the sound echoing through the still night air.
Liam hesitated, his hand hovering over the tarnished doorknob. The metal felt cold and unwelcoming under his touch, sending a shiver up his arm. He knew he should turn back, that no good could come from entering this place. The warnings he had heard echoed in his mind, but curiosity and a strange sense of duty held him there. But something, some unseen force, compelled him forward. It was as if the house itself was drawing him in, whispering secrets that only he could hear. He took a deep breath and stepped inside, the threshold feeling like a barrier between 2 worlds.
The air inside was heavy with the smell of dust and decay. It was a scent that spoke of years of neglect and abandonment, of memories long forgotten. Cobwebs hung from every corner, shimmering faintly in the pale moonlight filtering through the grimy windows. They looked like delicate ghostly veils, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The furniture was draped in white sheets, their shapes distorted and menacing in the gloom. Each piece seemed to hide a story, a fragment of the past waiting to be uncovered. A grandfather clock stood frozen in the hallway, its hands pointing accusingly at the time of his arrival. It was as if time itself had stopped in this forsaken place.
The silence inside was almost deafening. It was a silence that seemed to have a weight of its own, pressing down on him from all sides. It pressed in on him from all sides, broken only by the sound of his own breathing. Each breath was a reminder of his presence in this place, a place that seemed to reject the living, and the creaking of the house settling around him. The old wooden floorboards groaned under his weight, as if protesting his intrusion. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon him watching his every move. It was an unsettling sensation, as if the house itself was alive and aware of his presence. A shiver ran down his spine and he pulled his coat tighter around him. The cold seemed to seep into his bones, a chill that was more than just physical. He took a tentative step forward, his footsteps echoing on the bare wooden floorboards. Each step was a test of his resolve, a challenge to his courage. Each step seemed to amplify the silence, turning the house into a vast, echoing chamber of his own fear. The shadows seemed to dance around him, mocking his every move. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a frantic rhythm against his ribs. It was a reminder of his vulnerability, of the danger that lurked in the shadows. He had to get out of here. This place was not meant for the living. The sense of dread was overwhelming, urging him to flee before it was too late.